reduction in the number of cars on our road. Is that the answer?
Well, I don't think it is, really. I mean, what do? We stop doctors driving to hospitals? Do we stop... whose journey is most important? You know, that's the problem.
And who's going to make the decision? Who's going to play Solomon?
Exactly. We're stuck with this system. I don't know whether it's the best system we could possibly have had. It's delivered massive social benefit. We've got goods being delivered to shops by road haulage. You know, everything you buy in a supermarket got there by road. Everybody who's a salesman is there because there's a road. You know, it's a tremendous part of our economy, and we shouldn't underestimate the value. Now, people do say, you know, too much congestion, too much pollution, too many dangers, but we've got to replace it with something better. And at the moment, we haven't got anything that's better. So what we ought to be doing is making the most of what we've got, and I think that's quite obvious to everybody. John Prescott, Deputy Prime Minister, God help us, said in 1997, if I can't reduce the number of journeys made by car in the next 5 years, I will have failed. Well, fail he did, because the number of journeys made by car didn't reduce over 5 years. Still continues to grow. It's not growing at an enormous rate. It's not growing as fast as it used to. We're getting to several sorts of saturation here. We're getting towards the point where travelling in certain cities takes too long, so people make alternative arrangements. Businesses have located out of city centres onto industrial estates where there are better road connections, because their goods and their personnel can get in and out more quickly. And this is a sort of a self-regulating effect. You know, the whole of society is managing congestion. We're choosing when we travel, where we travel. People who put in businesses are choosing where to locate those businesses to get travel efficient. And mostly we're doing pretty well, you know. I mean, you can go where you want by car. We do go where we want by car, and very effective it is too.
It's interesting you mentioned Don Prescott making that observation, because, as you know, he was famous for advocating the expansion of greenfield sites for new homes. What people didn't realise is that those trains that come in from those areas are already packed. So introducing a whole new range of accommodation, housing, flats, bungalows, whatever, is only going to have more people using the same train service.
Yeah, I mean, a personal view of this for me is that we should let the market decide these things. People who pin their profits on the success of a scheme will look quite widely to make sure that they're delivering what people want. You know, there's no point in building a load of houses that haven't got adequate connections to the rest of the community. People can't get to work, people can't get to the shops, and the houses won't sell well. As soon as you get a politician trying to make a decision that's in everybody else's interests, they tend not to look at those things that may affect the desirability and the viability of the project. I say let the market decide. That's not a view of the Safe Speed campaign. That's a personal view.
Robert's in London. He's called to have a word with you, Paul. Hello, Robert.
Hello, Robert.
Hi there, Mike. It's good to hear your voice again.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed your show as well. I hope we hear a lot more of you.
Oh, you're very kind. He's just after my marmalade jar collection. That's what he's after.
I mean it, mate. As soon as I heard your voice, I thought, oh, smashing. And I stayed tuned into the whole programme. Your friend there as well, Paul. It's nice to hear somebody talking a bit of common sense. You know, a lot of what you're saying is just normal common sense thinking.
Absolutely. Right? Straightforward common sense.
Where I'm coming from here, I could rather on all night. I know I've not got that long, so I'm going to try and cover a quick few points. Was it 120 million quid you mentioned that they were taking in a year?
Yeah.
Right, well, it's not. It's a heck of a lot more than that, Paul, because every time somebody gets done with a camera, insurance companies are raking money in.
You could say, certainly. That's just the money from fines. Those are the fixed penalties that are paid as a result of speed cameras.
Yeah,
120 million.
Yeah, Paul, but the insurance companies will be making a heck of a lot more than that.
Yep, quite right.
Right, and a lot of these motor road organisations are involved in insurance as well, and they haven't been fighting very well for the drivers. That's
true.
Paul. Alright?
Quite true.
Right. I just wanted to get that one out of the way. I've been driving professionally now for nearly 30 years. 17 of them I've spent driving in London and around London. I've never been done for speeding. I speed all day. It's my job to speed. I wouldn't get my job done if I didn't. I've never had an accident. And there's one other thing I would like to add, Paul, and that is, see if somebody shows me and points the finger at someone and says that person never speeds, I'll point the finger back and say that person is a nuisance on the road.
Absolutely. What we need is a nation full of drivers who adjust their speed in accordance to the conditions. That means going slow where there are hazards and risks, going a bit faster when the road is clear. And you know, as we become experienced road users, that's exactly what we become good at. We become good at adjusting our speed and our driving to suit the conditions. That's what it means to become an experienced driver. It's your primary... The accelerator pedal, as a driver, is your primary risk control. When there's a hazard, you come off the throttle and you deal with the risk. If there are pedestrians in the road, you don't just slam into them at whatever speed you were previously driving at. Usually, you see them in the road some distance ahead and you ease off the throttle, and that's all you've got to do. And that's what the process of safe driving is all about. It's not something you can measure in miles an hour.
Robert, thank you, and hopefully we'll speak very soon. Thank you. You're listening to talkSPORT. It's been an absolute delight to have Paul Smith with us. James in Wrexham is our final caller for you this morning, in as much as we'd like to spend some more time, but we're starting to feel guilty that we kept you out of your bed.
I'm fine with it, Mike. I mean, I'm having a ball. I enjoy doing these shows. Yeah. So if you want to go a bit longer, that's fine by me, but whatever your schedule allows.
Sure, I'm just going to have a word with He Who Must Be Obeyed. So, George, we have before us this situation. Shall we take a couple more calls with Paul until 4:30?
I think it'd be rude not to.
But not a minute beyond.
Okay, yeah.
Because otherwise we're not going to be able to get our story of the New York Dolls.
That's right, yeah.
I know in your record collection, James in Wrexham, who's next to come on, will always be found a healthy selection of New York Dolls tracks. When I discovered that these were the first boys to discover men in high-heeled boots, platform soles and women's tights, I thought this is obviously the band for radio. James, you're on talkSPORT. Hello.
Hello guys, how you doing?
Oh, we're having a small time here today. It's perfectly all right. We're all on a diet. It's dieting with a smile. What happened to you?
I'm an actual truck driver from Ireland, and I'm actually in Wrexham here, and I've been listening to your show, and there was 2 points I wanted to raise. One of them was to do with the lighting on the roads, advising of what's happening up ahead with an accident, or to slow down to speed limits. Why they never seem to switch them off after the accident has occurred, or after the queues is long gone. And the other point I'd like to ask Paul was about, I seen something on the internet one time to do with speed cameras on the police, that they have to actually be visible from 500 metres away. Is that right?
I don't think it's 500 metres, no. We've got 60 metres in urban situations and 100 metres in rural situations. Those are the visibility guidelines that Department for Transport currently works to.
Oh, and in that 100 metres, are they supposed to be wearing high visibility clothing, or...?
Yes, they are. If you did get caught by someone who wasn't wearing high visibility clothing, then that might contribute to your defence.
I've just seen 2 occasions, like where the police have been mounting speed checks, and one of them is notorious and would be known by just about every truck driver in Scotland, and that is the A75.
Uh-huh.
And on that road in particular, the cops are very partial to hiding in along the ditches without high visibility vests on them, and they just stand out as a truck is coming along, or a car, put the gun up, clock the person. If they're not speeding, to stand back in again. And over in the east of England, I've often seen where the police, one guy is actually standing on the side of the road watching the cars come towards, talking on his radio and advising the guys down ahead of him to stand out with the speed camera that there's a car coming fast.
Yes. Well, it certainly happens. If they were doing that in such a way that they were targeting people who were driving recklessly fast, that would be, I would think that was a good thing.
Oh, I think it is a good thing, yeah, but the way some of it is done, definitely know that they're not following their own guidelines, or their own laws.
And it feels like revenue raising, because we know that the speed we were doing at the time when we were targeted was safe and appropriate according to the conditions. It's a bit ridiculous, actually, to tell people that the speed limit is the same as the safe limit, because obviously it isn't. 30 miles an hour in some urban situations would be murderously fast, and 70 miles an hour in some rural situations is pretty modest, really. So, we need people to concentrate on safety factors rather than legal factors. With just too much emphasis on the legal factors and not enough emphasis on the safety factors.
I just wanted to say to you as well, I know a lot of English guys are ringing in complaining about the speed of Irish trucks on the road and saying that we're above the law or that we don't actually get done. We actually do get done, not so much so with the speed cameras, but with police patrol units, absolutely, and we do be fined and brought to court possibly the next day.
Yes.
So it's not, we aren't above the law.
No, indeed.
No. Good to talk to you. Thanks for that,
All right,
James.
cheers.
Have a good night. Bye. Very interesting. I was listening to you talking to people about driving appropriately and responding to the conditions, and I just wanted to ask you, do you think the future could carry camera imaging? Doesn't it say strange to have camera now? It just seems such a quaint word. But also an atmosphere readout, the temperature, the humidity and everything else taken into consideration.
I think that the major driver of choosing a safe speed is the road conditions and the behaviour of other road users, and that changes from minute to minute and second to second. I mean, a particular straight stretch of road at, I don't know, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, is traffic everywhere, pedestrians on the pavement. You may need to slow down to 20 miles an hour in order to negotiate it safely, and we do. The same road at 3 o'clock in the morning with good visibility, no other road users around, 40 miles an hour might be a perfectly sensible speed, and until we've got an emphasis on road users responding to the conditions, we're not going to be able to improve that choice of speed. Are they going to drive at 30 miles an hour during the day when it's too fast and 30 miles an hour at night when it's too slow? That's not what we want.
Could we find ourselves in a society where those speed advisors, those not round, but circular, what do we call them?
Speed limit signs? Vehicle activated signs. The things that flash up, are they?
That'll do it. If we've got those altering depending on circumstances.
Well, there are a lot of circumstances, aren't there? There's the sort of vehicle we're driving, a Porsche can, under certain circumstances, go safely quite a bit faster than a transit van that's heavily laden. There's the immediate behaviour of other road users in the vicinity. Are there pedestrians ahead? Is there traffic slowing down? That's going to affect how fast we can drive. There's the width of the road. Are we going to vary the speed limit every time the width of the road changes? There's a bend in the road. Are we going to vary the speed limit every time there's a bend? It might start raining. Are we going to vary the speed limit every time it starts raining? It might be foggy. Are we going to vary the speed limit every time it gets foggy? And the answer is that however smart we get with variable speed limits, we can't get anywhere close to keeping up with the changing conditions that drivers have to deal with. And if we've got drivers who can't deal with the changing conditions, well, that's a very serious problem. I mean, maybe they need retraining, we need to get them off the roads or something, but most of our drivers can deal with changing conditions and do deal with changing conditions. I'd like drivers to be better. At the moment, drivers are getting worse. There's no doubt about it. Transport Research Laboratory has researched it twice, and they say the reason that road accidents aren't falling as expected is because drivers are getting worse. Well, I'm absolutely certain the reason that they're getting worse is we're putting them under unnecessary pressures, we're giving them the wrong information and concentrating them on the wrong safety factor. Of course they're getting worse. What do you expect?
It's been very interesting to spend some time with you tonight, Paul. You've altered my views, because I found myself feeling profoundly guilty that I might have been responding the wrong way. Because I recognise myself, I really did
the instinct that drivers have, that these cameras are the wrong policy, the instinct is undoubtedly correct. So trust your instincts. You were right all along.
Thank you very much for that. Just to remind everyone that you can discover some more about Safe Speed Road Safety Campaign and the adventures of Paul Smith at safespeed.org.uk. Thank you once again, Paul.
My pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much indeed. Take care. Bye-bye. You're listening to talkSPORT. One of the very important bands in the 70s, late 1969 I think they started working together, were the New York Dolls. And very difficult to sum them up because they were outrageously in front of everybody else. At the same time, they were flawed. But the interesting thing is they had an influence in quite an interesting way in what was happening in London, not just musically but also fashion-wise. So in just a moment, Chris Need joins us in the studio to talk about his New York Dolls book, Trash. And a copy of the book, signed by Chris, is up to be won after our chat. So if you're feeling lucky, this is the place to be. If you'd like to be calling the programme and joining in our news review of the press for the day to come and looking at the news that everyone else is going to be talking about early, the number is 08704 20 20 20, 08704 20 20 20. And Grey, Female and Loaded is the way one of this morning's papers describes the older women who are about to become more attractive, because most of Britain's millionaires will soon be women in their mid-50s. How will this alter the male-female relationship? Suddenly, she's earning more than you, and she's got £1 million more than you. Will you still love her, or will you feel a secondary person? You might be smiling, but the truth of the matter is, it could affect your relationship. There you are, sitting with a nice green credit card, and she's got a nice platinum one. It can be spiteful, can't it, life? Still, the good news is, you're a great driver, and she's still rubbish. You wish. She's probably paying less insurance than you are. To be part of the programme is 08704 20 20 20. I'll give you the quiz question right after we've heard from Chris Needs. This is talkSPORT. It's Mike Allen for Mike Mendoza. And yes, he's perfectly all right. He'll be returning next week, as usual, on the diet.
talkSPORT.
You're listening to talkSPORT 1089, 1053. I'm Mike Allen, and we're talking to Chris Needs, co-author with Dick Porter of the book Trash, The Complete New York Dolls, published by Plexus. Good to have you with us, Chris, and congratulations on the recent wedding.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. Now, I wanted to talk to you first off about getting caught in intimate moments with Debbie Harry. I know this was an altogether different Mrs. Needs, but we will come to that a bit later. I'm sure in the 80s there wasn't a boy's room that didn't have Debbie Harry on the wall. I wanted to talk to you first off about the New York Dolls, and as you mention in the book, to understand the New York Dolls and what they made them a unique and perfectly flawed group. I'm going to say that sentence again because I think it's great. A unique and perfectly flawed group, as it's necessary to gain an understanding of New York City itself. So can you tell me a bit about that sentence and those times and the events that provided the cityscape backdrop to the band?
Right.
When were those times? When were those years?
Well, in the early 70s, New York was a very different place to what it is today. It was very... it was the New York of the legend. Scuzzy, funky, dangerous, on the edge, dirty and sleazy. Basically all the things the New York Dolls were. I mean, they were very much a mirror of their city.
So if you'd have placed them in Sweden, put the same characters in Sweden,
it
wouldn't have happened.
No. I mean, even though there were New York Dolls impersonators came out of Sweden, Hanoi Rocks, maybe, the Dolls, they came out of the suburbs. They didn't actually come out of Manhattan.
Were they fundamentally a New Jersey band?
No. Queens, Arthur Kane was from the Bronx, David Johansen from Staten Island. But they gravitated towards Manhattan as kind of the yellow brick road to this metropolis, which was everything that anyone would aspire to, a bit like over here they might do with London. They gravitated there, and apart from the fact none of them were all American boys, they were all of,
first-generation immigrants or something.
Yeah, most of them. And they gravitated towards Manhattan and the West and East villages, and... even though the West Village was sort of Greenwich Village, the arty, folky, poetry scene, the East Village was totally dangerous, and the Lower East Side, where the Dolls first settled in 1971, was totally almost a no-go area. It was just populated by drug dealers and hookers.
Yeah, a bit like latter-day Washington Square.
Right.
Now, the band, we're talking about them and their influences, were keen to establish their own look when it came to clothes. And it's very interesting that this sort of attitude was starting to happen in the UK at the same time. I don't know if they were sort of flaming each other or it was just destined to happen. But could you tell me about the big British band that had their leader staying at an expensive New York hotel and the other two members of the band at a far less expensive address, but they saw a couple of the dolls on the street, or a couple of the boys that had become the dolls, and were so impressed by their clothes they wanted to buy them?
Well, there's a story here, because Sylvain and Billy Mercier, the drummer, ran their own clothing business, which they started when they were teenagers. It was called Truth and Soul, and they did very well. It was like a knitwear thing, doing Colombian sweaters and stuff, and Sylvain was regularly going on business trips to London, which took him to Kensington Market, where, you know, the London fashions like platform boots and loon pants and things like that were happening. So there was this kind of cross-pollination of fashion styles from New York and London via Sylvain's business visits. And him and Billy were walking down the street in Manhattan, and they saw Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell from the Jimi Hendrix Experience, who went, "Oh, I like your clothes, boys," and not knowing that Sylvain had actually been nicking the look from his visits to Kensington Market, where the Experience were getting their stuff. You know,
Cross-fertilisation.
Definite cross-fertilisation.
Definitely.
Fashion styles there.
I'm talking with Chris Needs about the book Trash, The Complete New York Dolls, published by Plexus. So in the ethnic facets to society in New York at that time, there had to be gangs. So how did the dolls survive that? Because they were outrageous. They obviously went to outrageous places, but there came a point where oil and water ceased to exist together.
There's a song called "The Way I Walk," and there's a quote in the book from Willie DeVille, who was in a band called Mink DeVille, and he said that, you know, you had to have the right attitude in the walk to get away with it in New York. If you're walking down the street looking all timid, looking at your map and all scared, then you're going to get mugged. But if you're strutting down the street like the dolls did in their tutus and platforms and stuff, you know, you get away with it, and they did. I mean, New York City then was a city of freaks, and they out-freaked them.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it sounds just like the school playground.
Yeah.
You know, the whistle goes for lunch break or something,
right,
and the Second War opens up. You know, it's that.
Yeah.
Now, with all this going on, you mentioned in Trash, the book, The Complete New York Dolls, a 60s gig in the Park in New York where the late Jimi Hendrix played a warm-up act for the Young Rascals.
That's right.
So he tore the place apart. You make mention of this.
Yeah.
And everyone was getting very excited, and then the Young Rascals came on, and suddenly there was this massive sea change that went across the crowd.
Yeah.
Instead of applauding them, because everyone had been responding, going, "Oh yeah, they're coming on," they started to boo them. Now that was a bizarre situation, surely.
Well, that was Sylvain who told me this, the Dolls guitarist. He went to that gig. It was in July '67. He'd gone to see the Rascals, and Hendrix came on, and he'd never seen anything like it. He said everything changed. You know, the whole axis of the universe shifted that day, you know. And, the Young Rascals suddenly seemed old hat.
It's extraordinary, because when Jimi Hendrix appeared on UK television, I think his first television appearance was...
Ready, Steady, Go.
Ready, Steady, Go, and he played Hey Joe.
That's right.
Or something.
Yeah, he did.
What he mimed, I think.
Oh no, he played live. He
did
insisted on playing live.
Wow.
And played with his teeth.
You can imagine all that volume. I bet the balance engineer at the TV studio was crossing his legs and saying, "This can't happen to me." Now, you claim to have been on a bender once with Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
And I just had to ask you, how come you remember?
Because you don't forget things like that. I mean, I must admit the last few hours were... I mean, I've spent some time with Keith. I wrote a book about Keith, and I spent some time with Keith a few times. And, the last time wasn't in a journalistic capacity. He just said, "Come over to the Savoy for a few drinks." And I did, but I mean, the last time I think I was there for about a day and a half, 2 days. And it was great.
Is he unaffected, as people claim? He just seems, when he's on television and they're doing an interview with him, he just seems to be sitting there playing his guitar, and he seems very relaxed. Now, is that a persona? Because I can imagine he can project a persona.
Keith has this, he said this to me, you want that Keith Richards, you want this Keith Richards. Now, if some kid wanders in who's a complete junkie and falls over trying to impress Keith, Keith can outdo him You know, he's got this withering look. But if you approach Keith and you tell him an old carry-on film joke, he'll go with that. You know, he loves comedy, and he's just a very... bear in mind, you know, since he was a teenager, he's been in the public eye. You know, he's not had a normal life, and he goes with the flow and he does his thing.
Yeah. I'm talking with Chris Nees. I'm Mike Allen. We're talking about his book, Trash, The Complete New York Dolls, published by Plexus. There's an aspect to your character, Chris, and I can't... You have to answer this for me. You seem to have a long association with successful and charismatic people, and you are on the edge when it comes to music, because not only have you an interest in this era of New York East Coast contemporary music, but you also got involved in urban dance and hip-hop. And these are all a million miles apart, but there's obviously something about you or the makeup within you that draws you to something which is dangerous and a bit edgy.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just love music. I love all styles, not all styles, most, and I've always been fascinated with the lifestyles. I've always been, you know, if I read the biography of Jerry Lee Lewis, or I mean the story of Johnny Thunders, and then the story of the New York Dolls, I'm ending up writing one myself about probably the most tragic band that ever existed, you know.
It must have been a real buzz when you got the call that you were going to interview Johnny Thunders at last.
Yes, that was in 1977. I'd seen the New York Dolls when they played Beavers in London, in Kensington, and that was amazing. That was my life-changing punk experience. I'd followed Johnny. Johnny was like, he continued my Keith fixation, because Johnny was like a cartoon Keith, all exaggerated and grossed up, you know, with the hair and everything. And yeah, I went to see Johnny, and he was a very nice person. He was very sweet. You know, that's a lot of people would say he might hit you up for your last 20 quid, but he was a very, very sweet, lovable kind of guy. You know, he had big puppy dog eyes.
Look at the photographs of him. He seems to have this ability to project this fierce persona as if you don't even think about it.
Well, there was that side of him, especially with the Heartbreakers. I mean, the group after the Dolls that he was in, they were much more mean. They were the mean streets of New York. The Dolls weren't. I mean, the Dolls... Jerry Nolan was the only one who was ever in a gang, you know, and he was in a proper Brooklyn gang. You know, he saw men killed and things like that. But the Heartbreakers took on the mantle of the gang, and they started dressing in Italian suits, and, you know, yeah, you wouldn't cross them. But, you know, on the other hand, Johnny had, you know, I spoke to Johnny's sister. She's lovely. And she talks about a little brother, you know.
When we started talking this evening, I said to you about Debbie Harry and a little bit more, because you were discovered at one time with an earlier Mrs. Needs in the company of Deborah Harry from Blondie.
Well, yeah, I mean, this one's run and run, but basically...
It's got to, hasn't it? Debbie Harry. I mean, there's a whole chunk of the nation that still have a long kiss goodnight when they start to go to sleep with Debbie Harry.
She was just Debbie, who was in Blondie, and I was close to Blondie. They're one of the bands that I got close to, only because I started writing about them before other people did. And we were mates, and I just kidded around with Debbie, you know, and kidded around with the rest of the band too.
Bless my heart, you're breaking.
But, I can't, it's a bit, I mean, sad to say it's a little bit hazy, because everyone had been drinking quite a lot, but I was, for some reason, we were halfway up a ladder backstage at a gig they did in Aylesbury. And, yeah, the missus walked in.
Aylesbury, that takes all the pain out of it. Finally, I must ask, can you please tell me the story of how the New York Dolls found their name?
This is controversial, but every time David Johansen did an interview, he would talk about, he'd have a different story. David's wonderful with words and stories and anecdotes, but there was a place called the New York Dolls Hospital over the road from the boutique where Sylvain was working, and he said, I must call my band the New York Dolls one day. He didn't have a band then. Then the band formed, and he wasn't in it, and then they were calling themselves the New York Dolls, and basically it was Sylvain's name. And Sylvain is the only surviving doll along with David Johansen, and, you know, therefore they've got as much right to the name as anyone. You know, their new band is called the New York Dolls, and the spirit lives on with them.
Well, I really enjoyed the read. I did say to you when we met in reception, very briefly, that it moves at the speed of a CSI investigation on TV. I mean, it really moves very, very quickly. And I would imagine that if anyone has a burden, you know, concentrating on those rather old-fashioned style reads, they'll have no trouble with this. I mean, if you take this to read on holiday, you'll come back by Wednesday. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Chris Needs, author of Trash, The Complete Guide to the New York Dolls, published by Plexus. This is talkSPORT. I'm Mike Allen. Good morning. The New York Dolls. Many thanks to Chris Needs for coming in. How did the New York Dolls get their name? If you can answer the question, give me a call on 08 704 20 20 20. 08 704 20 20 20. And I'll be delighted to send you the production copy of New York Dolls. Trash. It's been signed by Chris, actually. Signed Love and Trash. Nothing kinky about him, not in those shoes. The great news is we're going to be looking at the answer to your problem. If you've been concerned about your health and thought, how is this getting out of control here? Panic Nation is a great book put together by Stanley Feldman and Vincent Marks, and we're going to be speaking with Stanley Feldman in just a moment. You're listening to talkSPORT. I'm Mike Allen.
Okay. Yeah. Are we about to get it just a little hot and sweaty in this booth?
Baby.
Ladies, let's go. Soldiers, let's go. Let me talk to y'all and just, give you a little situation. Listen. You see the get hot every time I come through when I step up in the spot, make the place sizzle like...
Open a newspaper, turn on a radio or television, and you'll come face to face with another food scare. If you have a family or perhaps you live alone, it's equally as depressing. So what can you do? Well, there is a book called Panic Nation, and Stanley Feldman as one of the people involved in the production together with Vincent Marks, and Stanley joins us tonight. Stanley, welcome, good morning.
Good morning to you.
What was